Build the strategy to grow your business. And today we have from United Kingdom, Alex Smith, and we are very happy to have people from United Kingdom in the podcast because the majority are from United States. We love the people from United States. We love you, and we want all of you to be in the podcast, but it's made me specifically very happy that have guests from UK because, as all you know, I'm based there in London. So Alex is an author, speaker, and also a consultant in this specific topic, how to build that strategy to grow your business. So Alex, tell us, what are the 5 steps that you recommend entrepreneurs to build the right strategy so they can grow your business?
Welcome to Entrepreneurs Are Leaders podcast with Harry Sardinas. Interviews with world's most influential entrepreneurs that share tips about how to grow your business exponentially. Charismatic speaking, leadership, branding, marketing strategies designed to help you monetize your knowledge, find true happiness, and manifest your goals and dreams.
Thanks a lot, Harry, and thanks for having me here.
Pleasure.
I can get straight into it. And actually, like, just before getting into the first step, I mean, let's just actually address step 0, maybe, because step 0,
the elephant in the room.
the elephant in the room is actually even trying to have a strategy in the first place. The bigger issue that companies have is not so much. I don't look out there and see a whole bunch of businesses with bad strategies. I don't see that at all. What I actually see is a whole bunch of businesses with no strategies and who they aren't even thinking about it. Before we came on air, you put it well. You said, like, you start a business and you do whatever you do, and then you're just jumping from fire to fire to fire. And this is how most businesses are run. And there is never actually a moment where somebody steps back and actually tries to plot a smart course through their market that is going to raise their profits, that's going to separate them from the competition, that's going to unify all of their actions, etc. So look, if you are even thinking to yourself, like, hey, what is our strategy? If you even ask that question, you are already ahead of like 95% of entrepreneurs out there. I'm very sorry to say, but this is the truth. So that's your sort of step 0 right there. So hopefully today we could at least get people over that.
Okay, let's go ahead. What are the 5 steps? Step number 1.
So the first one then is we just need to think about, okay, what is the kind of essence of strategy? What are we trying to build when we create our strategy? And the most simple way of thinking about it by far is this idea that only is better than best. Most companies are very focused on being better than their competition. That this is essentially their strategy, so to speak. And they believe that if they can work harder, be better, be faster, whatever, than their competition, then this is what is going to make them grow in the market, and this is what is going to attract people to them. This is not actually normally true. The market doesn't reward the player who is the best at whatever it is that you're doing. Typically in that scenario, the market will actually just reward whoever's the most famous, whoever's got the best contacts, whoever spends the most amount of money on marketing. And that often won't necessarily be the best player. And if you think about your own business, like, you are probably not the most powerful, wealthy, influential player in your category. So you can't actually ever win a game of trying to be better than your competitors. The only game that you can win is to be different from your competitors, or in other words, to offer some form of unique value which people can get from nowhere else but you. So we need to begin by actually just calibrating our thinking to being like, okay, right, our job here is to find a way for our business to, yes, give people something they want. That's step 1. But step 2, it has to be something that they can't get from anywhere else but you. And if you don't manage to nail both of these things, if you only manage to nail one but not the other, you will be in a commodified position and you have no strategy and you have no leverage. So it's very, very hard, to come up with an idea for your business which is simultaneously has high demand, but also you're the only person doing it. But that is the game, right? That is the first thing that we need to focus our minds around. every business on the planet, we are all playing the game of trying to solve that riddle. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, 100%. So what would be the next step?
So when you've got that in your head and you've managed to sort of um, uh, wean yourself off the idea that being better is useful, uh, the next thing you need to do is you need to have, and it sounds very simple, but it actually isn't simple for a lot of businesses. You need to have a very strong, firm idea of what category you play in. Now, for some businesses, this is it you don't they don't even need to think about this, right? Like if you've, let's say you're a lawyer or you sell cereal or something like this, you know what you are. Oh, I'm a lawyer and I'm in the category of law firms. I'm a cereal. I'm in the category of breakfast cereals. Uh, and but for a lot of businesses, it's actually quite ambiguous what category they are in, and this is a serious problem. This is especially true with more tech-driven businesses or sort of more creative businesses, because if you don't have a basic idea of the category that you're starting in, you don't have any common ground with the market. Now, a lot of people who create these businesses, they don't want to be pinned down, right? They say things like, oh, I don't want to be seen. We don't want to be seen as a consultancy, or we don't want to be seen as an agency, or we don't want to be seen as this, that, and the other, because they think that they're more than that. They think that they're different. But you actually create a lot of problems for yourself if you do this, because you need something to push against. Your strategy needs some norms to push against. And so you need to pick a well-established category that already has a lot of people shopping in it and which people understand, which you can basically attack. So if we think about a company like Airbnb, for example, like Airbnb, right? Airbnb is not the same as Hilton, right? Airbnb is not a hotel chain. But in order to be understood and to get leverage, they had to sort of start from the position that they are a sort of variant of a hotel brand. And then they can start to riff off that and they can start to go in a different direction. But when customers first heard of Airbnb and they were trying to wrap their heads around it, they were sort of thinking, all right, so this is kind of like an alternative to hotels. We're starting in the category of hotels. And then they can build out from that, even though we all know that Airbnb is like fundamentally very, very different from hotels. So you, in some senses, you have to sort of swallow your pride and just accept what is the most basic, boring category of goods and services that we can make our home. We have to do that first of all, because if we don't do that, we're going to be all over the place and no one's going to understand what the hell we're doing.
Very good. And then the rest of the steps.
Yep. So when you've established that, okay, we're going to begin in such and such a category, the next thing is we're obviously trying to think about, okay, what can we offer differently within this category? Now, there's a trick here, which is that if you just ask yourself, what new thing can we offer here? Honestly, you're probably not likely to come up with a very good idea, because most of us aren't that creative, and most categories are quite mature, and already the basic needs of the customer are already being met. So it's going to be very hard to come up with just something off the top of your head. So there's a much more effective way of generating new value, which isn't, don't start with asking, okay, what's a new thing that the customer wants that we can give them? Instead, look at how your business already is and just ask, how are we already different from the other players in this category? Like, what things about us are already abnormal and a little bit weird? And these might be things that you deliberately created, but they also might be things that you never noticed before. Accidental differences are much more powerful than deliberate differences at this stage. And it also might be ways that you are actually worse than the status quo of that category. There might be ways that you're in some way weak or underperforming. All you're looking for is any random way that you might be different. And when you find these random, unintentional, whatever ways that you are different, then you can go on to step 4, which is to ask the question of, under what circumstances might these differences actually be of value to the market, of value to the customer? Under what circumstances might these differences give us an advantage? And typically speaking,
Mm.
like there will be what you're doing here is you're uncovering forms of competitive advantage which you didn't even know you had. So let me just give you a very simple example from a big brand who did this very well. Like we all know Nintendo and the Nintendo Switch, and obviously they're in the category of games consoles. And if you look at PlayStation and Xbox, the two other big consoles, they basically have this fight between each other over who can build the most powerful, but the most high performance games console. So, because they're very logical, they're like people want their games consoles to be very high performance, so therefore we're going to try and create the highest performance console. In Nintendo's case, they couldn't really compete on that metric. They were a long way behind. So they actually looked at, okay, well, look, not only can we not win that fight, but to be honest, we're actually quite weak in the area of performance. Our machines are a lot less high performance than PlayStation and Xbox. And on the face of it, that seems like a bad thing. Like you wouldn't want that to be the case. But they asked the question, well, hang on, under what circumstances would our low power figures actually be useful? Under what circumstances would they actually be an advantage? And for the Switch, obviously, this enabled them to create a much smaller console, which therefore was a portable console, which therefore opened them up to like party gaming and a whole new type of gaming, where they managed to then sort of dominate a certain section of the category. And then now Nintendo are the number one console manufacturer on the planet. So in the end, Nintendo beat both PlayStation and Xbox, despite having a quote unquote inferior machine. So do you see how like you mine these differences that you have in order to then generate new customer value like that, and doing it in that order?
Yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah. So then, Alex, the we all become entrepreneurs by accident, right? We have a typically we try to solve a problem for ourselves, and then we start to solve the problem for other people, and we don't even know what a strategy means. Completely different ball game. I remember that sometimes when it comes to the strategy and growing the business, uh, I'm always thinking, okay, what is the big, you have a lot of problems. You have sales problem, marketing problems, a team problem, product problem. There is a lot of problems in the business, and the whole business is all about solving problems. So uh, the big point is the following: what is the problem that if you solve that one, it will help you to solve all the problems. Yeah. So for me, I realized, no, kind of by accident, the problem was increasing the sales. So when we solve the problem, wow, the rest of the problem solve themselves because you increase the sale, you have more money now, you can hire people that are better than you to do the job. One day I arrived to the office and the team told me, Harry, go home, we don't need you anymore. We can run the whole business without you. Travel the world if you want. We don't need you to come here. So, um, but it's difficult when you are wearing all the hats as an startup founder. You know, you have you don't have money and you need to wear all the hats. You don't have resources. You have a product, nobody knows you. You have to sell. It's tough to find the first client. Uh, so in terms of strategy, what is your message for those one starting out? Because we have done the research and 80-90% of the companies fail in the first 2 years. Okay. One of the reasons is like this: they don't have a strategy. And if they have the strategy, they are is a strategy that they are listening, I don't know, from the parent, from the internet, from the source that is not completely accurate. And unfortunately, we don't want entrepreneurs to fail. We don't want business to fail. We want everybody listening to this podcast and even the non-listeners to start to grow the business and to be healthy, wealthy, and happy. So what is your message for those founders starting now the first business?
I mean, look, the way that you put it was really good. The sort of the thing the problem that solves all the other problems, because look, if you look at it this way, like, remember how I said before that the goal is to create something that people want, but they can't get elsewhere. Now, to make that very vivid, like, imagine if, if you had a business that was selling bottled water in the middle of the desert where everyone's dying of thirst. Uh, in this scenario, uh, you need to think that, like, this is like the archetypal perfect business, right? Where you're the only option and everybody desperately needs the thing that you're selling. Now, if that was your business, you can see how would you need to have good sales, good marketing, good administration, good hiring practices, good customer service. You can actually see how, no, you could run your business terribly, but the business would still be incredibly successful because you have so much leverage. So that example shows how, if you can get the leverage right, all of the operational things about the business become progressively less and less important. You probably still want to do them well, but you actually see that they aren't really the big story. And so what you get, if you're a person running a business, to my mind, your number one responsibility is to try and get your leverage as high as possible, to try and get yourself as close as possible to that sort of water in the desert ideal. Because that way you will melt away, as you said, all of these other problems. And I think that maybe people who start a business, they're sort of laboring underneath a sort of myth where they think, okay, let's say my business is made up of like 5 different parts, like marketing, sales, admin, whatever the parts are, all the usual things. And they think, if I do all of these things really well, then that will add up to a successful business. But actually, the truth is, you could do all of those things amazingly well. But if you apply them to a business that doesn't have any real leverage in the market, that business is still going to fail. It's a bit like you're tuning the engine on a car that has no wheels, right? That engine could be the most powerful, perfectly tuned engine of any car on the planet, but if the car's got no wheels, it's not going to move anywhere. So I think you need to recognize that, like, your whole job is just answering this fundamental strategic question of, how can we get leverage? How can we provide unique value to the market? And to my way of thinking, 50, 60, 70% of your energy should be focused on that question. And then all of the day-to-day operational stuff, you can kind of cram in around the edges, because if you get the main question right, that stuff is kind of gonna take care of itself. That's the message.
Yeah, I think that in terms of a strategy, if I knew, right, starting my business, that this is the problem that we have to prioritize, because if this problem gets solved, the rest of the problem gets solved. Because we're solving everything at the same time. Okay, we have a team problem, we have client problem, we have sales problem, we have marketing problem, we have contractors problem. So we need to gradually, I was solving all these problems, a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of this. But actually, the magic happened when the sales problem got solved and we did actually increase our sales. Wow, the rest of the problem got solved by themselves so easy that so that's why I think I agree with you that have the right strategy um, will get you ahead in business big time, because uh, I will I will save my first million even way faster.
Yeah,
It
I mean,
was
look, I think this.
I was stuck for let me think about it. Okay, it was 2 years. Yeah, 2 years, like no sleeping very little, working
Yeah.
hard, and then another 2 more years when we actually put this off and everything started to work out very well. But if I have a strategy at the beginning, I think will save me 2 years easily, because we solved it kind of by accident. We didn't know even that that this term strategy. When you're a startup founder, this term strategy for the business, this doesn't exist. People don't even
No.
know what business is. They have a product, they start to sell it, make a little bit of money, Wow, I'm in business.
Yeah.
Let me do more. And this is uh, the common space for first time founders that you see
Yeah.
out there. So what now medium size or large company, this is a different ball game because now we're talking about um, uh, large institution and in terms of I want to ask you a specific question because medium-sized business, large businesses, they are the strategy can save them literally millions, okay? And usually culture is a part that every time that I ask to the successful entrepreneur, okay, if you had to start all over again, what would you do different? And they are all telling me agriculture. If I knew that, if I knew that if I had to start all over again, I will pay way more attention to culture from the beginning
It's
to the
interesting.
to the
Interesting.
starting team, then to the medium team, because the culture, it's not the same when you have 10 employees and you have the startup and everybody will be Monday to Sunday not sleeping. Well, when you have 200 employees, you cannot have 200 people don't sleep. So the culture has to be adapting in terms of the how that business grow. However, there are entrepreneurs here that say to me that when they have 10 employees, there was 24 hours not sleeping, and when they have 200, it still was 24 hours not sleeping. But Alex, so how a strategy is tied to culture when we're talking about medium size and large businesses?
Well, I guess I would take that one click up and really a more say that strategy is tied to leadership, which is then tied to culture.
Oh, wow, I love it.
So
Ah, very good. Brilliant. I love the answer.
so it so it's like uh you yeah, as the leader of the business, you want to lay down a clear, exciting, focused vision for what people are going to do, for what the business is going to do, and that's extreme. Now, the vision and the strategy, right? They are not the same thing, but in a well functioning business, the vision actually emerges from the strategy. The strategy, let's call it like this is kind of how you're going to earn money, like what actually makes this business fundamentally work. And then the vision is sort of like if we keep on doing this and we make this work, what is the exciting thing that lies in the future for all of us if we do this for another 10 years and it goes really, really well? And you see in that scenario, because you had to start with what is the business doing and what the strategy is, the vision then just becomes a kind of a sort of a bigger consequence of that. So the two things are stuck together. And so then the leader in that scenario, they are able to paint this exciting future vision out of these strategies. So like, it's not a very good example because it's not very easy for people to copy. But at SpaceX, Elon Musk can talk about how we're gonna go to Mars and all that kind of thing, because that is kind of like a natural long-term destination of what SpaceX is doing today. So if I'm a person who goes to work for SpaceX, that's really, really cool. And I feel this is what we're building towards. And then you can create the appropriate culture around that, which obviously in the case of SpaceX is an incredibly intense, high performance culture because the stakes of what they are doing are so incredibly high. So so yeah, so we can maybe think of it like if we go to sort of like strategy creates strategy creates the vision, and then the vision can be used by the leader to create a sense of unity and excitement in the business, which is then going to create a strong a strong culture. And like you look at like people, why do people why do people want to go and work for SpaceX or Red Bull or these type of companies, these sort of companies where everyone's like, or Lego or whatever, everyone's like, oh my goodness me, I would love to have a job there. They don't actually know what it's like to work for those companies. They've never been inside those companies. But even those of us on the outside, we do know that those companies know exactly what they're about and where they're going, and there's a real kind of like exciting vision guiding the company. So then you're just going to attract, like a magnet, the right people to create the good culture. Whereas if you don't have that, if the company is like a blank slate, then the people you're going to attract are the people who either don't have a job now, but they want a job, or the people who maybe just want the money from the job. And so the motivation that the person has coming into the
Mhm.
business, it's a bad motivation from day one, isn't it? It's a very transactional motivation. So how are you going to create the culture if you were beginning with this transactional motivation? It's going to be pretty hard.
So let's talk about your book. What inspired you to write that book, and what is your favorite chapter?
Well, if you want the honest answer, the only real reason that I wrote the book at the time was because obviously I was sort of consultant, and I thought, if I write a book, then that'll look good. No one will read the book. No one will read the book, but at least I can say, hey, I'm an author, and maybe that will be impressive to clients. Now, that was the only reason I wrote it. And so then
Ah,
I was so I didn't think very hard about the book actually. I just sort of wrote it in like a week. I was like, what is the easiest, fastest book I could write? Because no one's going to read it.
well, when you know
As
what you're
it
talking
turns,
about, it's easy to write, right?
well,
You can finish
exactly,
fast.
exactly. Yeah. And so as it turns out, people then did read it.
And love it, right?
Uh, and then yeah, and it's been super successful, and it's probably the best thing that I've ever done. And people are just
Wow.
super into the book. So but yeah, it wasn't
Can you
but
tell
it
us the
was more
title?
kind.
Tell us the title and where people can buy the
So
book.
the book is called No Bullshit Strategy, and I've made a page on, excuse me, I've made a page on my website where if you go to basic arts, arts.org/welcome, on that page, you've got the book and all the links to the different platforms where you can get it from, Audible, Amazon, etc. But I've also got a whole bunch of sort of free resources as well that you can look into there, in addition to the book, to really help you kind of start to think in this strategic way. So yeah, the book is definitely
Mm,
the best resource, and you can get it from Amazon
mm,
and everywhere
mm,
else. But yeah, if you go to that link, basicarts.org forward slash
mm.
welcome,
Yeah,
then there's a whole bunch of other extra sort of practical stuff which are good companions to the book.
yeah. Critical thinking. The other day I was a while ago I was invited to speak in a conference, and the speaker was speaking before me. He was giving a conference about critical thinking, and he was saying, well, you need to do this, and then you have to analyze this, and then you have to do this, and then you have to do this, and this is when do you take the right decision. And I'm thinking, look, these people here in this audience, they are startup founders. They cannot take a week to take a decision. They go out of business. Maybe this is good for large corporations that save millions, but the critical thinking in terms of a strategy, right? And because we all think about, okay, the strategy basically is we have a problem and we need to solve this big problem, and all the rest of the problem we solve. And how we address that is turning the big problem in small problems, right? And this is when the strategy comes. However, there are some concepts that sometimes in conference you see speakers talking about, right? And and they all depends on the size of the business. They all depend. The strategy for you starting a business is not the same of a strategy that you are building the medium-sized business, not large one. And then you have the industry, the tech company. To get product market fit, you need a more let me call it sophisticated strategy that that other industry with some of them you have to be sometimes very creative because it's a lot of coffee. The other day, well, yesterday came someone to a podcast, to this podcast, that she's selling candy bars and she want to penetrate them actually in UK. Yeah, she's from Canada. And said, wow, you see, this is tough industry to be, because this space is flooded with big boys with big budgets, and you want
Mm,
market share for these people. This is a You have to be very creative. You need to have a very good strategy in order
mhm.
to make that work. So, in terms of critical thinking, Alex, and a strategy, what are the biggest um, things that people should be looking for when they have a small business, when they have medium-sized business, when they have a large business?
Um, well, the one thing that you really make me think of with all of that, and this is like, uh, this is quite a strange point, but it's something that I really believe in. Like we place far too much emphasis on having the quote unquote right idea or the quote unquote good idea. We believe that there is that the world or the market is some sort of puzzle, and if you find the correct solution, you'll kind of turn the key and it will unlock. Um, but but this actually isn't really true. It actually has. It's much, much more important that your idea be clear and charismatic than that the idea actually be good. Because what you find is that the world has a funny way of making space for bad ideas that are put forward bravely with a little bit of kind of sparkle. So if we look at like companies like off the top of my head,
Hmm.
Crocs,
Uh-huh.
Liquid Death, Yeti coolers. None of these were all on paper very, very bad ideas. They were bad strategies by which I mean that like nobody was asking for what these businesses created. They didn't really solve any problem in any sort of real sense. All of the ideas, if you'd seen them, if I presented them to you before the companies came around and said, "Hey, what about this idea?" You would have said, "Well, that's a stupid idea." But and yet all of these companies became like multi-billion dollar companies. So how did that
Hmm.
happen? Well, it's because they went after what they were doing with such focus and clarity and aggression that when people saw what they were doing, they were like, "Oh, actually, yeah, that is quite cool. Maybe I do want that." And so the world created space for these ideas. So
Hmm.
all of this is to say that
Hmm.
like you mustn't worry about being too analytical and work too much critical thinking, because to be honest, whatever your strategy is and whatever your plan is, like it's not going to pan out the way you expect. Classic Mike Tyson. Everyone has a plan till they get punched in the face. Blah blah blah. So it's
Hmm.
like don't over engineer it, and this applies as just as much to a
Yeah.
very big company
Hmm.
as
Financial
a small
projections.
company. Oh
Or
God,
the
yeah, no,
investors and the financial
don't
projections of
bother.
Tommy Harry. You
Yeah,
see, there is no company that's match the financial projections ever.
exactly. Exactly. Focus instead that the idea, it must be reasonable, right? It must be an idea which you can make a defense of, where you can argue, well, listen, I think that this will work because of X, Y, Z, right? It's got to be reasonable. As long as it's reasonable, the next thing you've got to focus on, the next most important thing is it interesting? When I tell this to people, do they say, huh, that's cool, or huh, I never thought of it that way before, or something like that? Like if the idea isn't
Mhm.
engaging and interesting on its own terms, people aren't going to remember it, people aren't going to execute it, people aren't going to want to be involved with it. So first of all, is it reasonable? Secondly, is it interesting? Thirdly, is it clear? Can people just remember it and work with it? Now, if you cross all of those hurdles, then
Mhm.
that is actually a very, very powerful, very rare idea that you have there. And you don't even need to worry if the
Mhm.
idea is correct, right? That
Mhm.
really, because there is no such thing. There is no such thing as a sort of right idea.
Mhm.
So yeah, you can. So yeah, to an extent, yeah, you can sort of relax a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So then, Alex, so what are the to sum up, right? What are the message that you have for the companies out there, okay, that they are taking uh they are not taking seriously strategies, and they are not building the right structure. For example, there are companies there in the past, like that they have collapsed just because the strategy have that vertical uh, system where they function like a big boat, it's like a big Titanic. So when you said, okay, turn right, so the whole boat had to turn right, and it's so slowly that they respond to change really slow, and they go out of business. Where other big companies have different formation, right? They have this vertical, big, massive elephant, Titanic kind of a structure. They function like having 3,000 little boats. So when the first CEO is in the first boat and says, turn right, all the 3,000 little boats turn right. So company with this structure that follow this strategy, this structure, can respond to change faster, and which is key in order to be in business. So a strategy in terms of responding um, to change of the
Mhm.
organization. Any comments on this?
Yeah. So sometimes you hear people say things like, "Oh, your strategy should change every year, or your strategy should change every 5 years." Blah blah blah. Like so. I mean, this is partially comes down to the definitions of the word, but I actually don't think this is true. Um, I think that the right way to think about it is that the the thing that defines a business, like I said earlier, is the value that it generates for the market, for the customer. Like that is the definition of a business. A business is a system that produces value and then exchanges that value for money, right? So that's all any business ever is. So the definition of the business is, okay, what is the value it's producing that it can sell? Now, this, under most circumstances, other than very, very exceptional circumstances, this value should never, ever, ever change. It should last forever. And we can look at a lot of very successful businesses like IKEA or whatever that have basically been pursuing the same strategy and doing the same thing for decades and decades. And what do you know? They're just fine. The trick comes in that what the top level strategic identity, let's say, of the business, that should be completely constant. But then you always need to be looking at how you need to change how you deliver it, because culture is shifting, technology is shifting, etc., etc. Now, and at each moment, all you're asking is, in 2025, how do we deliver this value? In 2026, how do we deliver this value? In 2027, how do we deliver this value? So do you see, you're always doing the same thing, but you might have to adapt your methods in or you have to basically keep moving to stand still. Like a good example of this is, I mean, this is a bit more of a sort of advertising example, but it still makes the point. Is Nike. Now, Nike have always, from their sort of brand perspective, they've always been about sort of overcoming struggle. That's what Nike is. Just do it means kind of like, you're going to struggle, you're going to be in pain, do it anyway. Nike, they're not about sort of winning, they're about the struggle. And that's why they've been such a charismatic brand. They haven't changed that strategy for like 50 years. But if you look back at each given cultural moment, the way that they brought that idea to life was very, very different. Back in the day, it was like all about showing runners who were putting in the practice, the hard yards in the dark, in the rain, showing the unglamorous side of running. That was a manifestation of like, just do it. But then you fast forward like 40 years, and they had the whole sort of Colin Kaepernick social justice, like that form of overcoming a struggle. You can see how it's the same idea, it's the same, or it's the same strategy that they haven't changed for 40 years. Just like how IKEA has basically just been doing the same thing for 40 years. These businesses are only adapting their method of execution. So this, I think, is generally speaking, this should be the ambition that a business should have for itself. Now, yes, I know that there are these famous scenarios where some business comes along and gets technologically disrupted and gets completely blown out of the water. But in fairness, these are quite overblown. They're the exception, not the rule, right? This actually doesn't really happen very often. And then, even then, with those businesses, if they thought of themselves from more of a value perspective than a product perspective, they probably would have been able to adapt with those changes. The reason that they got screwed is because they were not strategic, was because they actually thought to themselves, we are Kodak, we sell film, or whatever it was. They didn't think about themselves from the point of view of the actual value of the film that they were selling. And if they'd done that, then they might have been able to do things differently. So yeah, that's my thought on that.
Thank you so much, Alex. And for all of you following the broadcast, see you in our next episode of Entrepreneurs Lead. How brave entrepreneurs like Alex break that wall and make a business that changes the world. Bye for now.
Follow us for more on charismatic speaking, leadership, exponential business growth, branding, marketing, strategies designed to help you monetize your knowledge, find true happiness, and manifest your goals and dreams.